Shabbat Shalom. There was a man who entered a monastery. He took a vow of complete silence, but every 7 years he was permitted to say 2 words. 7 years passed. He came before the senior monks, who asked him for his 2 words. "Cold floors," he said. The elders nodded and sent him back to his work. After 7 more years, they brought him back in and asked for his 2 words. "Bad food," he said. They nodded, and he went back to his cell. 7 more years passed. They summoned him again to offer his 2 words. "I quit," he said. "Not surprising," the monks replied. "You've done nothing but kvetch since you got here." The Oxford English Dictionary defines kvetch as to talk about something at great length, often in an annoying manner, from the Yiddish kvetchen, possibly indicating to pinch, squeeze, or press, as in to squeeze the last drop out of something, to criticize or complain a great deal. The definition is not very complimentary, I think we can agree. And yet, the majority of writing about kvetching that I found focused on its favorable, even healthful aspects. How can kvetching be constructive and even worthwhile? Actually, a topic I've thought about a couple times with you, bringing us back after a couple years, which I rarely do. But in this beautiful parsha, we have the beginnings of the motif that will characterize much of the Israelites' discourse with Moses throughout much of the rest of the Torah. They kvetch. No sooner have they left Egypt, no sooner have they crossed the Sea of Reeds in an incredibly wondrous display of God's might and power. But they look, and there is no water. They asked, "Ma nishteh," what shall we drink? Which Howard chanted beautifully with great inflection earlier. What shall we drink? The waters were bitter that they found. Moses cried out to God, and God showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. I love Dr. Lieber's teaching on this. He refers to a midrash which envisions Moses asking God, similar to things probably we have said at one time or other in our life, "Oh, Holy One, why did you create brackish water in your world, a liquid that serves no purpose?" And God replies, "Moses, instead of asking philosophical questions, do something to make the bitter waters sweet." It's a powerful lesson for us. And yet, God is patient with the Jewish people at this point in their journey. They are really a brand newly born nation, and God allows them to whine and complain as we do with little kids, and especially babies newly emerged from the womb who have no other way to express their wants except by crying. It's been pointed out, if babies only smiled when they were hungry, no one would likely ever feed them. So this brand newly born people has something to say, and they're not so pleased. A midrash on Exodus, it's in Shmot Rabbah, imagines the Israelites complaining even before they cross the Sea of Reeds. The midrash imagines them complaining while they're crossing the Sea of Reeds. According to this midrash, they said, "In Egypt there was mud, and here we have mud. In Egypt we had clay for bricks, and here we have abundant clay for bricks." In the middle of the miracle, according to the midrash, a kvetch. They will kvetch multiple times in this parsha, always about food. And by the end of the parsha, Moses is afraid that they will actually stone him. God provides for them quail and manna and water from a different source. Later in the parsha, when Moses, as mentioned, strikes the rock by express divine command. But we can start to see the beginnings of what will be a contentious relationship between the people and Moses right up to the doors of the Jordan River. 'Twas ever thus, my friends. Rabbi Levi Artson casts a wise and compassionate eye on these complaints. He wrote, Kvetching is one step up from slavery. A slave cannot kvetch because of fear of the whip. More importantly, the slave mentality breeds apathy and a clogging of the emotional valves. It took 40 years of unclogging for the Israelites to be truly ready to finally enter the land with optimism, passion, and commitment. Jews have kvetched to keep our hearts open and our emotions flowing, often when our only recourse has been to talk about what's going wrong. Kvetching, Rabbi Artson says, has been our national safety net against emotional numbness, to stave off the abyss of depression or the trap of allowing our hearts to turn to stone. It's a really reassuring approach to the need to get whatever it is off our chests. Yes, of course, gratitude, positivity, and counting of blessings are absolutely essential for emotional balance, calm, and stability in a deeply challenging and troubling world. But can kvetching actually be effective? Many writers have opined about this. I'll quote from Jules Korelakos, who points to 3 benefits of the ancient art of the kvetch. 1, it's self-aware. We're given permission to recognize the challenges in our lives, and by doing so, we might even gain some perspective on all the things that are going right. 2, it's cathartic. Unburdening our cares, especially to a sympathetic friend, therapist, or in a journal, can lessen the weight of the woe on our hearts and stave off unhealthy and ill-timed explosions. 3, it can be communal. In a give and take or a large group kvetch session, bonds can be made that strengthen the resolve to make a difference, or even just to share the load of what may likely be a common concern or cause. Now, it's important to distinguish between helpful kvetching and just kvetching for kvetching's sake. Complaints that outweigh a person's useful contribution to an organization or society in which they work and live. Some folks hold to the notion that their complaint is their contribution, and that that's enough. Rabbi Artson addresses that directly. He counsels, kvetching is fine when there's no option to take any action, but it can't be in place of active involvement. Kvetching and pessimism, he suggests, are outdated, dangerous, and hold us all back from moving forward. In a time of such enormous perils and potential, we are invited, commanded actually, to take right action to help heal the world and bring positive change. Wouldn't we all perhaps like to live in that last verse of the Haftarah? And the land was quiet for 40 years. Doesn't make for very good headlines, but most of the time, that sounds really good. However, since we rarely do live in such peaceful times, kvetching is a good place to start. Kvetching is the ultimate Jewish call to action, if done productively and carefully. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, keenly and frequently reminded his worldwide students that Judaism has never been a passive religion, one where we accept the world as it is, rest on faith, and hope for better in the world to come. On the contrary, Jews have looked at the world from day one, seen what was wrong and what was in need of fixing, and have kvetched mightily for all the things we and our world require. Prayer, specifically the petitionary prayers of the weekday service, is in its way a kind of kvetch. Yaakov Adam Schwartz, in his article, Kvetching for a Cause, says, we ask, among other entreaties, for pardon, healing, deliverance, environmental well-being, freedom from fear and despair, mercy for the truly pious, and the thwarting of those who would harm us, because we need these things, and because they're worth pouring our hearts out over. And as Jessica DeMarco Jacobson writes, the supreme value of kvetching is that it can be one of the greatest sources of Jewish achievement and progress. After all, as the Jewish philosopher and theologian Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote, in man is not alone a philosophy of religion. All that is creative stems from a seed of endless discontent. May our kvetching lead to righteous action and be for the good of us all and the sake of a more just and peaceful world. Shabbat Shalom.